The FIA and F1 have been known to butt heads in the past because FIA boss, I don't want to say because, but this is a separate statement that I'm making. FIA boss bin Sulayem has been outspoken and vocal about his visions for the sport. And in Qatar, he had mentioned that he wants to see more F1 teams on the grid and fewer races on the calendar. The exact quote is, "If you say what is my dream, it is to fill up the 12 slots and to have one US team from an OEM, so car manufacturer, and a PU, power unit, and a driver from there driving, and then go to China and ask for the same thing and do it." This has obviously been a big talking point the last 2 weeks because the FIA approved Andretti's bid into Formula One, but obviously there's still many more hoops that they've got to jump through. Laurence, I'll start with you. What did you make of bin Sulayem's comments over the weekend?
Yeah, it's very targeted, isn't it? Because the more F1 teams means that F1's revenue gets split between more teams. Fewer races means there's less opportunity to charge big race sanctioning fees, and therefore their income is reduced as well. So it's like the two things that F1 absolutely does not want. Yet I do kind of agree. I think, F1 would probably be a lot more fun to watch, I think, if you had more teams. And at the moment, I think we've got so many races, some of which are in, places where the racing isn't actually that fantastic and there's not much of a history of any kind of motorsport fandom or culture or anything. And therefore, I would quite like to see an 18 race calendar like it used to be. I think it would be more focused. I think each race would count for more. I think, championships would either be more exciting when you've got two drivers going for it. You wouldn't have this big kind of period where you lose the thread of the battle midway through. And then if one team is dominating, at least you get it over and done with a little bit quicker. So, I actually kind of agree. I can't help but think, yes, in my perfect Formula One, there would be 12 teams and fewer races. But if you look at the financial realities of Formula One, we had this big argument. A lot of it was going on in Qatar and team principals, press conferences, and so on. Are we yet at a stage where the F1 ecosystem, the amount of money within F1, despite its recent growth and everything else, can support more than 10 teams? Or are we actually still a little bit of a balancing act with some of the teams? James Fowles, the team principal at Williams, pointed to the fact that Williams is still racking up huge losses because partly because it is investing in its future, but also because, we're not yet at this stage where the F1 pie of money is big enough to make sure that everyone is making a profit. It's still often the very top teams, who are bringing in stuff and are able to easily bring in sponsorship and prize money to cover the cost cap, and then also get all, they've already got all their expenditure paid for on new capital, on bits of their factory. Therefore, they don't need to invest huge amounts of money. There's still lots of teams doing the catching up. And so if you add another two in there, then that money is getting spread wider. And if you take away two races and you knock, potentially if you knock two Middle Eastern races off F1's balance sheet, you're probably going to decrease the amount of money they're bringing in each year by 120 million, dollars. Massive. So I think it's a very pointed comment, and clearly was meant as a bit of a firecracker just to increase the pressure on Formula One to make a decision on Andretti. And of course, the FIA is very keen for Andretti to join, and F1 still seems pretty lukewarm about it.
It was also interesting. He said he likened the governing body's position as a landlord. He said, "We are not a service provider. We own the championship. We leased it. We are the landlord. So that has to be respected also. My intention was never to embarrass or to put someone in a corner. Liberty Media, or FOM, Formula One Management. I am here for the spirit of the sport." Nate, do you agree with bin Sulayem?
I mean, I agree that the landlord, definitely. That is, if you actually look at the way it, the whole
structure,
the structure is, that is basically true. But I think there is a question in Formula One about why bin Sulayem and the FIA picked now to have the Andretti bid. I think that obviously Formula One's making, it's in a very, very good place at the moment. But I think that decision alone was seen as quite antagonistic, at the start of the year, to open that tender up. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I completely agree with Laurence. I mean, back in the day when you had more teams, that those were kind of the glory days you look at now when it comes to the size of the grid. So I think ultimately it is a better thing. And I think one of the things that was really interesting, just to kind of tie that question in with the Andretti situation as well, the prevailing feeling I got from everybody in Qatar is, unless you are part of a team, nobody can really understand why Formula One teams don't see the benefit of something like Andretti coming in. Because yes, in the short term you do lose the money, but if the product is getting better and better, then down the line it's getting better as well. And I was in a small media session with Ben Sulayem on the Saturday just before the sprint race, where amusingly he said, I really hope Max doesn't win it today because I want him to win it at the Grand Prix. Didn't have time to write the story because the sprint race literally started as we left, so it would have been a fun one. But I think he does see it as everything that the FIA is doing with new teams, etc., is for the betterment of the sport. And I think that's where it's quite an interesting situation at the moment, because I don't think teams see it in the same way. I think that they actually, you get the impression that some of the teams find Ben Sulayem to be just a bit frustrating, a bit of a nuisance, because he definitely has a certain way of going about doing things. He's very even in this media session that we had with him, he's very blunt, very direct. He can be a bit confrontational as well. And I think that, I don't know, I think some of them maybe wonder how Jean Todt would have handled this whole situation if he'd still been in charge. But yeah, it's an open question. I know I haven't answered your question directly, Katie. It's mainly because I don't know if it is purely for the betterment of Formula One. But he kept pointing out, he said that, in terms of Andretti, the FIA doesn't make more money or less money if Andretti is or isn't in. He kept saying, when we announced that, the share price went up of Formula One. So he definitely feels that the FIA is trying to put Formula One in a beneficial position. But yeah, I think that this now is really the fascinating, the big talking point for the next few months, because I think Formula One's decision is really going to shape how politically things look in Formula One for a long time, in terms of with the FIA. If you turn it down, you can effectively, I think you can turn around and say, well, are these teams now 10 franchises rather than teams? Are they locked in? Is the only way into Formula One now you've got to buy one of these existing franchises, or sorry, we're not letting anyone in? Because they all keep saying, well, down the line we want to let somebody in, but there's always going to be there's always going to be someone who's losing money. There's always going to be someone saying, well, look, this isn't great for us right now. So yeah, it feels a bit like a pressure cooker at the moment. And I do think at some point it's going to come to a head at some point. I don't know whether it will be a massive fallout, but there's going to be some moment when Formula One has to kind of confront this. And the FIA, I think, are just waiting. I don't know whether they're waiting for Formula One to make the wrong decision, but I think that they're like, well, we've put them in this position now, and it's all on them, which I think is a position Formula One doesn't really like to be in.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.